You are surrounded by the ancestors right now. How do you feel about that sentence? At school, the history that we're taught naturally revolves around royalty, political upheavals, huge battles, big moments that have shaped the world we live in today. And our families, in all sorts of different ways, have played their parts in these events too. But we can also, however, think about the more mundane, the everyday lives of those who walked before us. Moments that may not be recorded in the history books that teenagers try to memorize the dates from before an exam, for example. Yet these moments and these lives may feel harder to grasp. They're the hazy, blurred outlines of figures that we cannot fully see. But maybe we can focus in on them at least a little better. The ancestors. Who do we mean? What springs to your mind when I say the ancestors?
We're with you now.
With you now.
We're with you now.
We're with you now.
We're with you now.
We're with you now.
We are here.
Let's start close to home. You could first picture your nearest relations, living or not. There they are. Then you could slowly start moving backwards. You might now see your grandparents. So you're now really beginning to see the faces, those familiar lines and hairstyles and expressions. With the camera lens drawing back again just slightly, we start to see many faces now crowding the frame. You might recognise a fair few of these new people. But this is just the beginning. The camera pans further to see more faces crowded in the frame, all pulling different facial expressions. Some smiling, yawning, gazing about them, scratching their nose. You don't think that you've seen these people before, you've never laid eyes upon them. Yet, as the lens pulls back even further, you can see a certain physical likeness. It's hard to put into words exactly what it is, but it's there. You can see a certain something, how one generation leads into the next. A certain look in the eyes, shape of the face, angle of the cheekbones. You can see all these different lines leading straight towards you. You're not here without these people. This moment, listening to this podcast, there's no beat of the heart, no ears to receive. This might sound obvious, but it's always a good reminder. And these people that you see here and the way they lead into you, like I said, this is just the very, very beginning. In the West, this way of thinking isn't encouraged, or not that I've seen anyway. The opposite could be said to be true. Or at least, that's the messaging I've received. Perhaps you got a different telegram. Instead of that wide camera angle with the many faces, I see encouraged what we might call an extreme zoom into just one face. Yours. Numero uno. Forget the past, it has nothing to offer. It's a bad, dark place. We had it so wrong. It's all about you now. You. Stay with me for a moment. Let's take this image of this extreme zoom in close-up. So, the most obvious interpretation might be that this perspective could lead to a sense of narcissism, being overly self-focused, self-indulgent, without much other context. After all, it's just you looking back in the frame. Another perspective to add might also be one of fragmentation, the only puzzle piece on the board. In this image, nothing is feeding into anything else. A fragment without the rest of the whole to fit into. Go on, see yourself there. There's just you now, looking back. When I hear people complaining about, quote-unquote, the current state of things, there's often one point that many lists seem to be leaning towards. We might call it different things, we invariably will, but we all seem to be circling towards some reference to feeling disconnected. Disconnection, the only puzzle piece on the board. We're all going to have our own takes on what this disconnection is in reference to. What do you feel disconnected from? If we're honest, really honest, there's probably a good few things on that list. And unfortunately, I have noticed whatever number you place them on your list, I would suggest that some reference to the ancestors will probably need to be on it. It might not be one of the first things that springs to mind. Many of us might note general feelings of community as more pressing. However, I'd argue that the ancestors are undeniably part of notions of community. Look around you, like really look. A lot of the landscape you walk through each day was clearly built by those no longer here. They've quite literally had a hand in shaping the world you walk through, the spaces we interact with each other in these pleasant environments that we create our social circles within, and we manage to economically survive, and you name it. And that's before we get to their creations of flesh and blood, their descendants. Whether you know their names or think of them at all, the ancestors are part of your community forever. You're not atomized, you're not alone. You can never be so. Wherever you're listening to this in the world, starting to think about your own ancestors can provide some transformational outcomes. I'm completely serious. This isn't meant to be overly sentimental or fluffy. I am quite sincere when I say starting to think about your own familial lines, those lines that lead towards you, can be transformational. I think that word transformational is overused, but this is a case, however, where it is entirely appropriate. When you begin to trek with sincerity and regularity down this particular line of thinking, your posture begins to change. I'm completely serious. How you hold yourself begins to alter. Are you becoming more aware of them now? How they sometimes press in at life's edges? Are you beginning to notice them? You're beginning to become aware of the debt that you owe. You may feel it in your footsteps as you walk across the bathroom floor, or late at night as a storm picks up under the December moon. Do you have any idea of the amount of human endeavour that has led to you snug under your duvet as the wind howls? And it's here. It's not once every 15 years at the next funeral where we make grand statements, but it's here in these everyday moments when you feel the ancestors pressing in at the windows and doors. This is where I've personally noticed that the magic really begins to take place. One way to look at it is as a chain leading from you into the horizon. This chain can be made of whatever material you like. It doesn't need to be in an Ebenezer Scrooge kind of way. It could be silk or gold or whatever you imagine. I say chain though because of each individual link that connects to the rest. We don't get to remove any of the links. We might want to, but we don't get to. A single link is removed, you don't exist. Look down at your hands now. Every single link has led to these dexterous tools you use each day. What we do get to do, however, is choose our relation, our perspective to this chain of silk, silver or gold. I can't tell you what that should be. That is entirely your own business. We, all of us, have our different trials to overcome. We get to see the faces of the links nearest to us, our immediate family. Then we might get a hint of a few sets of great-grandparents, as we saw earlier, crammed into the frame, still bristling with life. But beyond this, the faces attached to these links sadly begin to fade. For those ones further away, we see the chain leading away from us, winding up and down around a hilly winter landscape, across fields, through rivers, until it reaches the horizon as the sun sets, and we can't see its path anymore. Still, if we can't see the chain, we can, at times, still sense it, pulling us forward into a tomorrow that we can't see. We might sometimes, as we lay, yes, under that December duvet as the wind whirls, sense the weight of it. Irrational stirs of the heart that we push down and away with our morning coffee. But at often the most challenging times of our life, we may get the feeling that we are not as alone as current culture tells us that we are. Along a long, difficult trek home, we may sense there are other footsteps that walk beside us. Thoughts of ancestry aren't just for lords and ladies, or charting familial dynasties and the marriage of powerful families. I happen to have a great appreciation for my bog-dwelling, potato-growing, ditch-digging, gin-slugging ancient family. Ancestral musings are life-affirming. They remind us to use this gift, which has been handed down the ages to us, extremely wisely. The ancestors are watching. And to see us out, I'd like to make a final comment about this time of the year. There are vestiges of ancestral practices that do remain today. A good one is the visiting of a grave at important dates like Christmas, with flowers, candles, and other gifts. Some might even say offerings. Why do we do this at these specific dates? It's hard to argue that there's much encouragement, there's not, and yet we still feel pulled to partake in these small rituals. It doesn't matter our religious or spiritual persuasion or lack of, it just feels right to do. A natural fit to think of our loved ones at these specific dates. My mum remarked recently that on important dates like Christmas, the graveyard of her local church is full of people leaving these flowers and candles on the graves, but not actually stepping inside the building. I think that's really interesting. So for some people, a rejection of religion, it would seem in this example, yet with a socially acceptable form of ancestral acknowledgement lingering. And that's what it is. You may well say it's just a habit or it's paying our respects, that's a favourite one. But that's still what it is, socially acceptable ancestral acknowledgement. These days, I always try to leave candles on my family's graves at Christmas, and I'm always struck by all the wreaths and greenery left on all the different headstones and the sea of lights as candles flicker in the growing twilight. There is no other time of the year that compares to this sight. And as we get cosy this winter, close to dozing off round the fire as midnight approaches, why not think about those who have gone before, who might also appreciate a stall at the Christmas hearth?